Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. There are few guns of the early 20th century as iconic as the Luger. It was adopted by a number of countries. First, in fact, it was adopted by the Swedes in caliber 30 Luger, and then in 1908 by the Germans in caliber 9mm. Now, most people associate them very strongly with Germany, and they were still a second standard issue gun in World War II, although they had been supplanted by the cheaper, easier to produce, and more reliable P-38. And they made quite an impression on the American consciousness through war veterans, movies, TV shows, etc. As a consequence, they're highly collectible and got very, very expensive. In fact, as long as I can remember, they have always been relatively expensive given the pre-inflation values of the time. Now, getting into a reasonable shooter is probably going to cost you $1,400 to $1,600. And if there's collector's value attached, the sky's the limit. And there were a great many variations. Well, at some point, Erma of Germany, was a military contractor and firearms producer for many years, introduced a Luger variant that was more affordable. And these were available in 22 long rifle, 32 ACP, and 380 ACP, or 9mm Kurtz, as they called it. And that started in 1968 with the KGP68, the model KGP68. And then with the advent of the Gun Control Act of 1968, which required a certain number of features and safeties to qualify for import, they quickly added a magazine disconnect safety, so that if the magazine is not in the gun, it will not operate, and relabeled it as the KGP68A, and they imported them for several years. And there's a good few of them out there. But in the last... Now, I've always wanted one because real Lugers were obviously out of reach. But last year, the prices on these skyrocketed. They were typically available for $400, $450. And by the end of the year, they were in the $750 to $900 range, at least for the asking prices. So I thought these had become unavailable. And one day, the wife and I were at Pinto's Guns in Renton, Washington, and while one of the owners, Diane, discussed gardening with my wife, Chris kept trotting out guns that they were checking in that had come in recently, and this was among them. And this is one of the KGP68s. It is a rare variant with a 2-inch barrel. Typically, they have a significantly longer barrel. I think it was 4 inches. But this one has a 2-inch barrel. And he stated that he would be asking a very attractive price for it. And I said, you got me, I'll have that. So once it was all checked in and processed, I filled out the paperwork and I picked it up today. And it's quite an interesting little gun. It is very petite. It is not at all lightweight. Despite having a Zamac grip frame and steel operating parts. All the parts that are mechanically important are steel. And just basically the lower frame is Zamac, because Zamac was inexpensive and Erma were past masters at casting it. And it is a single-action striker-fired semi-automatic pistol. And the 22 had a different model number. But the KGP68 held 7 rounds of 32 ACP, 6 rounds of 32 ACP, or apparently 5 rounds of 380 ACP. So the capacity is 5 plus 1. But these were never, I don't think, intended as anything but a curio and a conversation piece and range toy. They had a rather checkered reputation for reliability as well, particularly feeding issues. which, if people knew, could typically be fixed with needle nose pliers by adjusting the magazine feed lips. But people in general didn't and don't know that, and so rather tarnish the reputation of the gun. And this differs from an actual Luger in a number of ways, not the least of which is that while the Luger is a locked breech toggle action, this is a straight blowback toggle action. And it takes quite a good pull. You have to take the safety off or you can't chamber around. It takes a pretty good pull to get it all the way back, at which point it locks back on the empty magazine. And then you can remove the magazine, which if you press the button firmly enough, drops clear, and then you can release the toggle. And they're very interesting guns. The ergonomics are quite nice. It does have this stupid target grip ridge, which you'll see more of in the tabletop. But they're neat guns, and I wanted one with the understanding that it was not the world's best gun. It's kind of like a Luger, and it's really neat. So, what's it like to shoot? Let's have a look at that. So, what is it like to shoot? A little weird. Now, it shoots pretty good, and it was not extraordinarily reliable. I did have a couple of malfunctions where cartridges failed to fully eject. But I'm not convinced that this gun was fired more than a couple times prior to my getting it, despite having probably been made in, at latest, the early 70s. Because the magazine and the operation got noticeably less stiff over the course of a few magazines of ammunition. And I did oil the gun. There was not a trace of oil on the gun anywhere. And it worked pretty well. And the reason it's weird to shoot, maybe it's a combination of the low bore axis and the good ergonomics with the toggle breech moving upward instead of just the whole mass slamming straight back. But it felt strangely recoilless, which is not usual for a small 380, even one that is relatively heavy as this one is. And I've really enjoyed shooting it. Now, the sights aren't much, and that's going to need a little bit of work because they were a little difficult to see, but I didn't have any real trouble producing good groups at 7 yards. So it shot well, it worked reasonably well, and the more I shot it, the better it fired, including the thing that I was told it absolutely would not fire, which was hollow point ammunition. And it ran it just as well as it ran ball ammunition. In fact, I had no malfunctions with it, but I fired a lot fewer rounds than I did with the ball ammunition. I probably put a total of, 70 to 100 rounds through it. I really wasn't counting. And overall, I was pretty happy with its performance. So let's take it to the tabletop and have a look. So the KGP68A is quite a petite gun. It is 5.5 inches in length, 4.25 inches tall. It is a bit chunky, though, because it's a bit over an inch thick through this rear portion of the assembly. Now, of course, it has the target grip to make it importable in combination with other features. The sights are a pretty nice ramped front sight, which, since my shooting session, I have painted orange so that hopefully in the future I'll be able to see it, and a tiny V-notch at the rear. So even with that painted orange, it is not a great sight picture. Nonetheless, I didn't have much difficulty shooting good groups with it at 7 yards. The trigger, according to the handy-dandy Lyman trigger gauge, breaks at 3 pounds. Now, there is a little bit of take-up and a little bit of creep, but while it's no Olympic target trigger, in practice, it's very easy to use, and the reset is nice and short. The safety mounted at the rear, up is fire, down is safe. The gun will not chamber around with the safety in this position. You have to put it in the fire position to get the toggle to come back far enough to pick up a new round. And it does lock open on empty. And to release it, there is no manual release. You just have to pull on the toggle and let it go. Magazine, as mentioned, holds 5 rounds of 380 ACP or 6 rounds of 32 ACP. And there is a slider here to help you with that. And this magazine spring is stiff as hell. And it's not all that easy to use. You're never going to have to worry about a weak mainspring in your magazine, though, because that sucker is not at all weak. Some people actually will press the button against the edge of the table to load rounds. But it is a well-made magazine. It's very solid. And it does pop free when you press the button. Although it takes a fair bit of effort to press that button, especially with this stupid target grip in the way. Now, here on top of the gun, there is a very nice stylized marking for V. There's a superimposed VEW for V Erma Werk. On this side, it has the serial number and Erma Werk model KGP68A. And on the steel portion of the upper receiver, it says caliber 9 Kurtz 380. On the opposite side, on the Zamac frame, it says registered patents, made in Germany, and LA distribution, New York, which is presumably the importer. Now, this does work differently than a Luger. It is not a locked breech weapon. It is straight blowback. And the ejector, or the extractor rather, is mounted centrally on the top and also acts as a loaded chamber indicator. I actually want to show you that, so we'll pop that out. And you can see there's a bit of red paint on the side of the extractor, and this pokes up just enough that you can see the red or feel the extractor when the gun is in battery with a cartridge chambered, and that's kind of a nice feature. Now, you can see the firing pin sticking out quite far. That's because the firing pin is your ejector as the bolt is being brought back to the rear. The firing pin bottoms out and acts as the ejector. It seems to work well. It tends to toss the rounds more or less straight up or slightly forward, but I wasn't hit by raining brass during my shooting session. So, all in all, it's a very nice little gun. I like it quite a bit. While I've been unable to determine any real production numbers for these, it does seem, just from what I've seen around over the years, that the 22s were vastly more common than the 32s and 380s. And in 22, it makes probably more sense because it's an inexpensive plinker, fun conversation piece, neato range toy. And in 380, with the typical 4-inch barrel, or 3.5-inch, or whatever it was, this really was not by any means a modern, viable pistol for self-defense. You could carry it, and if you got it working fine and you were satisfied with its reliability, but there were so many better options. I can't help but think that these were ever anything but kind of a novelty range toy and conversation piece. But they're neat, and I've wanted one for a long time, and I finally have one at a genuinely really good price. So thanks to Pinto's Guns. And just a neat gun. Now, as I said, I will be making checkered walnut grips for it, more in the traditional Luger oeuvre, without the target grip feature. Although, as I say, that is actually surprisingly comfortable to use. I just don't like the look of it. So, like to shout out to my supporters on Patreon. This is very much a shoestring operation, and your contributions help more than you know. Also like to thank channel benefactors, those individuals and businesses that have contributed to the channel in so many ways and really helped make this work. Shout out to Pinto's Guns, my tempters into financial damnation. And as usual, to Rain City Shooting Center for providing material support to the channel. So, that's it for this time. I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you again real soon.